Welcome everyone to the Lost World Museum. My name is John and this is my wife Kristen, and we want to welcome you to our what we hope to be a very interesting presentation on the megalithic structures of Peru and
The giant oyster clam fossils, also of Peru.
exactly. So, just as a way of introduction, that's who we are. And let's get right into it, Kristen. I'm going to show a slide here that you guys are going to like maybe flip out over. This is the giant alleged clams of Peru. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Kristen, tell me what this photograph is.
I stumbled across this years ago on the internet, and it was purported by a Peruvian paleontologist that these were giant fossilized clams, which of course immediately piqued my interest. And ever since I've wanted to see these. Were they really clams? He supposedly knows what he's talking about, so I wanted to go find them at some point.
And this was the only other photo too. There's basically two or three photos on the internet.
That's it. And then just this one article, which we translated into English. Not much information, especially on the location. It was just way up in the mountains of Peru between Pampas and Cochabambas, and that was way up around the 13,000 feet mark.
Pampas and Cochabambas.
Yeah.
Who's ever even heard of that?
They're two tiny little villages. They're not even cities. They're tiny.
So basically, that's all you had to go on.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And
it.
it could have been how many miles of stretches of land to even try to find
Well,
these?
looking at the map, I knew that it would be about 5.5 to 6 hours roughly from Ayacucho. But the problem is, again, trying to get transportation. This was during COVID. And also, they just said they were beside the road between these two towns. There was no other markers whatsoever.
How many miles between, or what length of time or period or distance between the two towns would you say approximately?
Maybe 45 minutes to an hour between the
All
two
right.
towns. I don't know.
So that's probably anywhere between, let's just say 30 to 60 miles, where you don't know where these are going to end up being. You don't know how far off the road. You don't know if they're covered, if they're even there. And so I understand it was a very discouraging trip.
Well, it was a little harebrained. I finally found somebody that was willing to, a taxi driver that was willing to take me, up there and attempt to look for them. But, we had very little to go on. And I can only imagine what he must have thought of me.
All right. So you finally get there,
Okay.
cold,
Oh my goodness.
freezing
Yes.
cold.
It was freezing cold because during COVID, you were required by law to have the taxi car windows open. And we're up above the 15,000 mark at one point, and I'm freezing my tail off. But when we came down the other side and we started asking people, everybody kept saying media hora, meaning half hour, they kept, and all of them would say they're not there anymore. Maybe one or two, the people have taken them and used them as lawn ornaments. So we weren't even sure that we were going to see something we would recognize.
So again, she's looking for what should be or could be giant clams on top of a 15,000 foot, well, at least in the Andes Mountains in Peru. And so you get there and ta-da!
Okay, just about the time I literally gave up because we were about going past Pampas at this point. I'm thinking, okay, we're not going to find him. The taxi driver said, "Is that it?" And I look off to my right, and there's a giant field full of these things that look like giant clams or oysters. So I'm ecstatic, and I go over there and I start looking at them and filming it. And it was fascinating but confusing because they didn't all necessarily look like a clam. I can understand why somebody would think that, and again, who's to say me contradict a paleontologist? But at the same time, you can see these were different lengths and different sizes, which, okay, I understand that the animals get, bigger as they grow. But some of them were like double, and some of them were single, some of them were longer or rounder. They were thicker or thinner. There was no like consistency to it. So I think the biggest one was over 5 feet. On average, I would say they ranged about 2.5 to 3.5 feet.
And 3.5 feet is around 11 feet around, circumference wise. They do give the appearance of a clam.
Well, yes, I mean, many of them do. But again, they're varying thicknesses and lengths. Some of them might look like a really, perfect clam, and the other ones look just like a lot of them look just like concretions.
And that was your
Yeah,
conclusion?
to an
Our untrained
untrained eye.
geological eye.
It's
It
gonna
was
My hope was to fill them well enough so that I could show them to those of you that can weigh in and say, no, this is what it is or isn't. By the way, I did see them sticking right out of the side of the hill. um, it was like an embankment that was broken, and you could see a couple of them sticking out. My conclusion was that they probably were finding these things as they were, cutting the road and forming the road, and that they dumped them in this field. And that, yes, some of them had been taken by they probably were dumped in a couple of places, and the others had been taken by the locals. These were probably some that they additionally found.
All right. And for those of you that want to see the full length video of her finding these and get more footage of him, right down below in the description, you'll be able to find the video link to that. All right. Let's move on to Ollantaytambo. Now, where we're going to bring you next is a place that I went as well as my wife in 2001. And this
2021.
21, sorry, 2021. And this was a fortress. They still don't know 100% what it was used for, but Ollantaytambo is, I'm sorry, I'm thinking Sacsayhuaman. Ollantaytambo is literally a fortress. They don't know what it's, these things are amazing. Now, what we're going to be talking about in this next segment is how tight fitted the stones were, but we're going to start off by talking about
Scoop marks and
scoop
how they
marks,
possibly were doing this.
scoop marks in stones. So without further ado, let's go.
So you often saw, and this was everywhere we went, whether you were in Cusco, Ollantaytambo, Machu Picchu, it didn't matter where you went, you saw scoop marks on the majority of the rocks. So it literally looked like it'd been soft and somebody had some kind of tool and they were just scooping either vertically or horizontally in different directions.
Now, as you get to this state park or whatever you want to call it, this right here is out in the front when as you're entering in. These are blocks that have been moved and set up sort of like as a display. The size of the rock, the beauty of it, how they formed it is in part what we're going to talk about. But the scoop marks, you see them, they're vertical here, up and down, they're on both sides. And many of the rocks that we saw were like that. Let me show you another one. All right, so go ahead and talk about this one in the foreground here, the one that's got looks like a bunch of little steps or chairs.
This this seems confusing at first because it's not a square, but you have to picture that there were other rocks butt up against this, and they sat in or out at various levels. So it wasn't like they were all evenly formed rectangles that fitted together like cement blocks or something. And this brings up some of the question of, again, origins, who made them and how they made them. In general, most of the people there will tell you it's Inca and that they made them by, chipping with other stone tools, and they'll show you the examples of what they think they used, these stones that they used to chip them. But some people will tell you, Peruvians, some of them will tell you that aliens were involved. But the most logical one that I heard was that there was a previous megalithic culture worldwide that the Inca found and built on top of. That was what some of the guides told us, and I think that makes the most sense. Especially when you look at how you could have possibly fit rocks together when they're not. It's one thing to just make a rectangle, plop it in place, boom, there you go. Very little time other than the amount of time to chip it. But to get them to fit together like that would be very difficult when they're not evenly spaced or evenly sized.
Yeah, and so before we go there, let me take a real quick step backwards then. What you're seeing in that rock in the foreground then is however they formed it, okay, whether they chipped it, whether they cut it, whether it was soft
I pushed them
and
into
they pushed
place.
them into place. What you're seeing here is a block that would be assembled in a wall with very little room, like no room at all, with other rocks, fashioned and placed next to it.
And so you would have seen at least probably 4 rocks across the front, pushed in at various levels. And then on the left-hand side, you also see where there were several rocks. And if you're there in person looking, it's tremendously complicated.
All right, so then we went from there up to the very top, the summit, which is about 300-foot elevation, and we're confronted with the Temple of the Sun. This is 6 megalithic rocks standing straight up. They're approximately 50 tons apiece. and they're approximately 14 feet high. The one that I measured was 6 feet wide and 7 feet deep. One on the
Beautiful.
extreme right. But look again at the scoop marks. What's the purpose of these scoop marks? Let me show you one other photo.
If they weren't soft, why would you spend the time like, okay, I want to go a little deeper and so because I want to have it appear like a scoop all the way down the front. That makes literally no sense.
No, no, it doesn't. Take another look here. You see scoop marks from start to fit, from left to right. You see them there. Now, some of them are in designs, but typically they're not. They're just there. And then you see these iconic nubs that come out that make no sense whatsoever. Some have one, some have two, and on a rare occasion you have see them with more than two.
And I never really heard a good explanation from anyone on that.
Yeah, to pick them up was one theory, but the problem is with the pickup theory is that the stones aren't consistent with these nubs. Some have them, some don't. Some have two, some have one.
And it wasn't like just the bigger ones have it. The little ones sometimes have it too, so it made no sense.
So, yeah, so these the scoop marks. Okay, let's take.
Basically just goes to show there's a lot more that we don't know than we probably do know about.
All
Also.
right. So check out the beautiful stone in front of you in the foreground with the two key marks on each side. Those key areas that have been
For those of you who've ever heard of some of the stones in Bolivia where they would have like a T-shaped or where they would melt metal and be able to put it down in to attach two rocks together, that's what you see on the front rock closest to you.
on the left and on the right. Okay, those are where a T would come in on one end of a piece of metal that has two T's on each end, and they would lock the rocks together, or at least hold them there.
Generally, you didn't see that though.
Yeah.
That was rare. But the more interesting thing is the stone in the back.
You see the one that's got the little scoop marks out? There's probably a good dozen little scoop marks on that one.
This is bizarre because if I'm correct, what this means is they had a lot of different stones that had fit into place there. Now, again, these stones are just thrown around here as if cataclysmically just thrown. I would ask different, guides, why do you see some half buried in the ground? Why are they scattered all around here? And the one guide told me they're called sleeping stones because the people got tired of carting them to their proper place and just left them in place. To me, it looks more like an earthquake or something very cataclysmic dumped them in place. So where this one particularly went, we don't know, but it looks like there was multiple rocks that were, again, this was all soft, and they had pushed them into place, and then this is what's left after that's all gone. This next one is a better example of it because alongside the pathway, you would see places where the wall was gone. Sometimes you could see where there was, like in this case, four rocks came together right here. One sat, a couple of them sat deeper. The one in the back, like middle left, that one sat a little higher. So they sat at different levels. And again, it looked more like somebody didn't cleverly carve this all out to fit this one deeper and this one a little bit higher. It looked like it was all soft and that rock maybe weighed a little bit more when it stuck in place or got settled down in farther and the other one's not quite so far.
And that makes some sense in the sense that how they got them to fit so perfectly with such large rocks. If they were small rocks fitting them perfectly together, you could sit there and sand it with sand and cloth or leather and you could chip it away until your heart's desire. It's not a very large cross-sectional area and it makes more sense, practically speaking, that perhaps you could get that kind of precision. We're going to move into our next segment, which is going to talk about how tightly fit were these. And we've heard various things through the years, can't fit a knife, a card, or whatever through it. I wanted to see it for myself. I wanted to try and fit something myself into it. And that's what we're going to see next. Sorry, before we do.
To show you one more example of that, you can see on the right-hand side of this block, the back right, closest to the drop-off, that's where one of the stones sat down deeper in it and the other one sat higher. So again, everywhere you looked, you found evidence of not that somebody wanted it that way, it just, that's how it happened because they were soft.
All right. Here's
And
one more.
there is one theory out there that there was some kind of cement mixture or something like that. And I saw one video on the internet where they had the surface of it had accidentally been crumbled away, and it looked like it was a veneer covering the rock. Whether that's true or not, I thought we'd show you this because that was one area you didn't see that a lot on the rocks, but there were times like this in Ollantaytambo where it looked like there was maybe some credibility to that idea, but maybe that's just the type of rock it is.
All right, now here we go. Tight fitting.
This is what makes
Was this in
everybody.
Machu Picchu? This was in Machu Picchu?
No, this one was Ollantaytambo.
Oh, Ollantaytambo as well too. Okay.
But everywhere you went, we saw the
Look
same thing.
at that. Some people have gone as far as saying that it was a laser that did that. Some are saying that these are circular saws with some sort of mechanism. Others are saying that this is a hand saw that did this. But certainly this can't be a rock crushing another rock in order to make these precision cuts.
Because again, that tightness went just even around curves. There was no flaw. Some of these rocks are 5 to 7 feet thick, like the ones in the Cusco Palace, for example. How do you get a rock? How many times would you have to lift it back up? Because, oh, okay, boys, we're off a little bit, 3 feet back on the left, we're off a millimeter. How many millions of times would you have to keep lifting that rock in order to get it if you were chipping it, if chipping it or sanding it with sand?
All right, so now it's time to take a look and see just exactly what. Now, what I'm doing there. Let me show you what I'm doing. Okay, I just 1 second here. There we go. You see this? This is one of those feeler gauges, metal gauges that you use for spark plug gap is one thing you can use it for. I brought this to Peru, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you the thickness of this. Whoop, let me get it so that it'll focus in. Now I'm going to turn it and show you. That's how thin this is.
And watch how flexible this is. You can see that this is bendable. It is so thin it's bendable.
This is 9/100ths of a millimeter. 9/100ths of a millimeter. And that's what I was using right here.
And couldn't get it in
I
between those
couldn't
rocks.
I couldn't even get it in more than a millimeter. And then whatever I could get it in, it was consistent all the way down the wall. Couldn't get it in. It was just absolutely amazing. Look how tight this is. And why would you put that little doohickey lip there, you know?
And
Why don't we make it even why
again,
don't we make it even more difficult?
if you were trying to create these stones, a basic rectangle would make the most sense because you could slide it, 2 stones across each other with the sand between it, and you could get something that's pretty flat. But if you're trying to create that little lip all the way back through the depth of that stone,
Yeah, there's depth here that you got to take in
that's not even
consideration.
not even logical.
And it's not because it's not apparent. I mean, when you're looking at it on the surface, you don't really think about it. But then somebody will tell you, or you can see if you look and think about it, just exactly how deep this is. And then you got to figure in your mind, you got to imagine that the cuts were made in such a way that they went all the way back as well too. So you got the front, and then you got all the way back, and that's what makes it even more
This is not to
incredible.
not to take away from the Inca, because either the Inca did it or the Inca found a first culture. In other words, a culture before them who should get rightfully the honor of having created this kind of technology or abilities. So whoever gets the honor, somebody was really amazing.
And truthfully, we don't care who did it. Really, all we're doing is repeating what the theories
guides.
of what the guides who are natives to that area, that are locals that have been working these state parks, so to speak, for 20, 25 years and have their own ideas on it. They're the ones who have to be around it every single day, have to puzzle their wuzzler over how this was done.
In fact, one of the guides who became a good friend of mine from Ollantaytambo, he looked at pictures that somebody from who'd been to Egypt showed him, and they were comparing notes on the styles of the rocks and everything. And he said, that is a worldwide megalithic culture. He says, what we've got here is what you see at Egypt and what you see around the world.
So one more peek before we end here. All right. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming on board and checking us out. By the way, again, the full-length video of our adventure with the clams is going to be right down there in the description. Also, what we put up on the screen is our newsletter, and also not only do you get our newsletter, which is basically once in a while we'll update you on something cool or unusual, but also you'll get an alert on all of our YouTube videos when they're uploaded. You'll also get a free report titled The Three Top Reasons Why Noah's Ark Must Still Exist. So I invite you to join us. I want to thank you for joining us today, and we are going to sign off for now. We have several hundred videos on our channel. You're welcome to watch what you watch. And again, we ultimately ask the important and provocative question, where did we come from? From apes, aliens, or Adam? Kristen, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. Guys, have a wonderful day.